Starting. Okay, I'm gonna have to continue bringing people in here. My goodness, we are already live. Danny, I think you've just joined us. Grabbing more and more people. Hey everyone, still setting up a little bit.
Hey,
Most of you probably don't have this link. How's it going?
going pretty well.
Cool. I am beginning to share word that we are doing this. Okay, I'm gonna bring Jeff in here. Jeff's gonna be joining us as well. So, for those of you that are actually seeing this right now, probably very, very few of you, or those of you catching the VOD after the fact, hi. This is, as you can tell from our shoddy start here, a much more casual affair than you might be used to seeing from us. This is essentially just kind of hang out, relax, chat, shonen, good stuff. So as I continue to bring some more people in here, Jeff should now be joining us, and I'm going to post this all over Facebook and get absolutely everyone to join us. We have, obviously, hi, I'm Jean. You well know me by now. Clint is joining us as well. Clint, having the chance to join us again after Tier List Tuesday. It's nice to have you back. I know that your schedule's been too busy lately to join us on Beamcast proper, but let's just start off kind of the roundtable. What have you been up to lately? Like, what sorts of things have you been reading? What's caught your eye?
I think I've been reading a lot of stuff, minus the big three, really. I've been reading through pretty much everything else. It's a really interesting time for a lot of stuff. Like Hayate has gotten really important recently, and Kenichi is in a really good, important arc. Yeah, a lot of things going on. Toriko just got out of a really big moment and has big moments coming still.
Yeah, I think if we get to it, we may not get to it until next week, but I do want to take a look at the kind of the trends in Shonen lately, like the series that have kind of come on strong lately and other ones that have backed off over the last year or so. I want to make sure, first of all, that we have everyone here. So Dan, you were already here. Hi. I know that
Hey guys.
you actually do get to join us more often for the Beamcasts and all that, but same question to you. Like, what have you been looking at lately? What have you been reading? What's caught your eye?
Recently I've been going a little more retro. I've been reading Kinnikuman, the wrestling manga.
Oh,
I've actually wanted to get into it because I kind of like watching the anime of Nisei, the sequel, when it aired here, and I figured I might as well bone up on the original. And so far I've gotten through. It's quite a lot of reading to do. But I've gotten somewhat far. I'm a couple of volumes in already. It's art is kind of rough, but it's interesting to see that Kinnikuman, as you know, is one of those manga series that went from a comedy manga and then transitioned into something a little more serious. Originally, it was a manga about basically like King Muscle. He was the main character, Suguru, I guess is the name. Pretty much just fought monsters, kind of like Ultraman would, or like fought like kind of he fought like monsters that invaded Japan. And it was a comedy series. He's a comedic character. Then it transitioned into being more wrestling, oriented. And that's when things kind of, I guess, it gained even more popularity, and I can see why. It's a pretty fun read.
yeah. I quite a long time ago I started reading that. I've not finished. I'm nowhere near. I think just started to get into the period where it was transitioning a little bit into the serious action, but
Hmm.
the scanlations were unavailable at the time, and I could not find. I believe it is licensed in certain capacities, or at least it was back then. I could not find it for legal purchase, which I would have been happy to do. It just wasn't available,
Hmm.
at least where I was. But
Yeah, the original isn't, but Nisei seems to be all licensed, and so I don't know where you might find it nowadays.
yeah, yeah, there are a lot of ones from the older times, like the '80s series in particular, that were licensed, some of them even fully published to completion, and yet it's kind of hard to find them. Saint Seiya, for example, I at least have had a really hard time tracking that down. Jeff, hey, how's it
You
going?
guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. It's giving me a mute message before I think, even though I unmuted it before that.
Well, don't click that. So, same question to you. Let's get it all out of the way. What have you been reading? What sort of series have caught your eye recently?
Recently, I haven't been reading as much as before. I've been kind of busy. I'm still going through the original Dragon Ball, which is something I wanted to do for a while. I just recently got to the part where they introduced Android 8, and I'd heard about him a lot, but I wasn't entirely sure what his deal was. Definitely very different from the other androids, I would say.
Have to
Uh-huh.
silence it.
Yeah, in general, I've been trying to go through a bunch of the series that I bought a while back but never actually got to. There's some very strange ones here. I've got one of the. I'm not sure if you can see this or not. I've got the omnibus for Tokyo Babylon right here.
Can
I'm not
sort of
sure
see
when
that.
I got this. But
Cool.
it's probably going to be next.
Yeah, we can sort of see things. The light kind of comes directly at us, but it's cool. Revamp your
Yeah.
entire house or apartment to suit this crappy low-budget show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just give me a few
So-
months and I'll move and I'll take care of that definitely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, be sure to build an actual like manga chat show discussion studio, purpose built, of course.
Uh-huh.
All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about, only got a few bullet points here. This is not going to be a super long show. But it was announced last week, and it's come into effect this week, that Crunchyroll would be, and is now, they've licensed through Kodansha, and they've begun to Simulpub, I believe they call it, manga, which we've been calling for an incredibly long time. Not necessarily through Crunchyroll, just we've been calling for someone to do this. I've long maintained that it was an opportunity at free money that all of these publishers were basically just turning down. I understand there are logistical complications. Fair enough, I get that. But basically, you had these companies who were focused primarily in the Japanese market. That's cool, I get it, that's where you're from. But all you really need, realistically, is a few translators on site, and then the rest of it's basically all digital. So Kodansha has chosen apparently not to do this on site entirely by themselves. They're doing it with Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll is now distributing select manga titles that they run currently, they publish currently in Weekly Shonen magazine in Japan. And so we are now getting series like Fairy Tail and Kimi no Irumachi, Yamada and the Seven Witches, Nanatsu no Taizai, I mean several series here, UQ Holder and a bunch more. First of all, the absolute utmost importance is, does it work? So I've asked each of you to kind of check it out, not necessarily put it through its intense paces, but to just give it a try as though you would try any other site, Scanlation, Legal, no matter what it is. Clint, let me start with you. You've checked out Crunchyroll manga. What was your first impression? What did you make of the usability of the site?
I think overall it's pretty well done. I don't really like that the default for the site is to I don't know, it has a kind of fidgety interface where like scroll controls how you move through the manga, which is plenty convenient, but it's also downsizing the manga because it's not filling the page with it because you use your scroll bar to go to between pages. I haven't played around with it much. I know there's a full screen option, but generally I don't like those very much because, I'm reading manga. I also like to be aware of like what my friends are saying to me in chat. I think these are normal expectations, like other tabs that I have open that people have when they're reading online, and I think based purely around that, based around going between different things, the UI isn't the greatest, but it's clean and it's professional, like I would expect from like a paid site like this. So it's better than some of the options out there.
Yeah, what about you, Daniel? What did you make of it?
Very much in the same way. I took a look at the fairy tale chapter, and there are certain details that are in this one that weren't in the Scanlation version. Just like some side notes that they threw in there. But for the most part, it's completely serviceable. There's no reason to not choose this over the Scanlation version unless you really want it like 3 days earlier or something like that.
Right.
It's definitely like quality based. I mean, I can't really speak for the translation, but like the way that it's presented is perfectly fine. And it reads. I guess it reads in 2 pages per viewing. I don't. I haven't tried other manga apps to see if they're all like that, or like if you can change it to one page only. But yeah, it's pretty neat.
Okay, yeah, I noticed it defaulted, at least for me, to 2 page. If you could switch it to 1 page, I didn't notice it immediately. Maybe I just wasn't looking for the right option. Or also, I just like 2 page, so I probably wouldn't have been looking for that option. Jeff, what about you? What'd you make of the site?
Um, I checked it out a few days ago, back when it first started out. I didn't mind the interface too much at the time, though. If I had I did find it a little odd the way they went about introducing some of the series. Like, they don't seem to have as much interactivity yet as like the anime and dramas do. Like, I couldn't find anything that would actually indicate when the series actually update yet. And I also found it odd that they would. I prefer the way Viz does a lot of their series, where they actually start with the first chapter, even if there's several chapters in, because they know that most people don't. Like, most people wouldn't have read the earlier things. Though I understand that the point of this is to try to get people to get the subscription so they can actually support the series. Though I'm not. It just I like in particular my example was UQ Holder, where they started with chapter 2 instead of 9 or 1, both of which would have made more sense, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of catching up on these series, you could reasonably expect that some of the really popular series would already have a decent fan base. I mean, Fairy Tail, obviously. I know Attack on Titan's gotten huge, so that would be another one. But that, I mean, honestly, I'm looking over the list right now. Mysterious Girlfriend X, Space Brothers, Capellion, Yamada, My Wife is What. I mean, honestly, what American fan? I'm sure there are a few. There's a few out there. But realistically, you're not going to come across all that many people that see My Wife is Wagatsuma-san, and they're already caught up, and they can just pick right up with whatever the most recent chapter is. A grace period maybe of like a week or two to get caught up might have been nice. But largely, though, I do have to agree. The site is fairly usable. It's clean. You can find what you want pretty easily. The issue I had, I don't know if the same problem cropped up for you guys or for anyone else. It was pretty slow. Each time, and I've tried at various different periods, different days, and different points in the day to make sure it wasn't just increased traffic in my area or something at one particular time. It's very slow to load pages. And that's kind of compounded. I don't really care for I don't know if it's Java or I don't know what the coding is, but whatever it is, the actual presentation in the book style format basically was what Clint was referring to. I mean, I understand this is coming from a book. I mean, an illustrated book, but it's a book nonetheless. I understand what they're going for there with the whole page flipping thing, but can we just get over that, really? We know it's not a book. We're not holding it in our hands. It's on a computer page. You don't have to come up with this fancy, elaborate way of doing things. Just put the images on a page. The scanlation method, maybe you're trying to distance yourself or something, but it's not necessary to go that different. If the scanlation method works, where it's just click the image to go to the next page, just do that.
If I might interject,
Yeah,
it
please do.
seems pretty instant for me.
Really? Okay. It could just be on my end. I mean, I'd be curious to hear if any viewers out there have had similar problems to me. It took me an age to load the next page of any one of them, not just any one in particular. I
Yeah.
tried 4 different series, and it was the same thing. Very long time to load one page, click the next page, very long, etc. So,
I
um,
click and then but I mean, even then, they should account for weak lower spec systems
yeah.
at the very least.
I remember something
And
like that happening with Viz manga too. Like, sometimes, like, it would be sort of half and half. Sometimes it would be instant. Sometimes it would take like 10 to 15 seconds for the next page to load. There
Hmm.
never seemed to be any indication of which it was.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it's only me, I'm not gonna be too I'm not gonna be too upset. Come on, guys. Crunchyroll, fix it for only me, please. No. But I mean, even if it was completely instantaneous, I still don't really think that the book format is necessary. The other complaint that I had about it was the way that the images were being scaled. I'm sure many of you are familiar just with zooming in and out of images, whether it's via Photoshop or on your browser or something like that. Um, I was having issues with the scale being at one of those ratios that doesn't quite work. I'm sure that for those of you that are familiar with scaling images constantly, you'll find some ratios that work perfectly. It'll just look smaller, but that's what it's meant to do. and then you'll hit like 68.5% zoom or whatever ridiculous number it is, and it's kind of pixelated and sort of blurry and chunky here and there. And that's what I was getting for the images a couple different times. Not every time, but sometimes. So, again, maybe I'm in the minority here, but if it happens for me, it must be happening for some people. So that is an issue they would need to work out. But that's the usability. We seem to generally be pretty favorable about it. But let's look at another aspect of it. What about the fact that it is only the newest chapter? The big point, I would guess, with a move like this on behalf of Kodansha and then through Crunchyroll would be to stem the tide of scanlators and to win back the audience going through their official means, and then obviously you're going to start them off with the free, and those are the free users that are really starting to get invested in it are going to want to sign up for the extended premium services. Is it enough of a hook? Clint, do you think it's enough of a hook right now? Is the service good enough with only getting the latest chapter to compete with scanlations?
No. Sadly, and I can't ever really see this changing, if you can get something for free, you're not going to pay for it. So if people can get manga for free, then they're not going to pay for it. Now, that said, you can get the newest chapter for free, but if you want the other chapters, you're just going to go on a scanlation site and read up to the newest point, and at which point are you even going to bother switching to a site that has no real humongous benefit? Because normally, I guess the advantage of doing something like switching to a Crunchyroll site from what used to be from scanlation sites would be an increase in the quality of the scans, an increase in the quality of the site, an increase in the professionalism of the translations. But there isn't really that noticeable of a jump. It's not like when you switch from an off-brand to a name brand and see like a noticeable change in quality. It's kind of neglectable. So I don't think people are willing to pay a lot of money for that. Are people going to pay for it? Yeah, in the same way that people already pay for Crunchyroll. I mean, a lot of people do. It's going to be a popular option. Is it going to kill scanlations and stuff? No, absolutely not. People are still going to get stuff for free if they want it.
Yeah. I think at this point, at least, with the service that is available, first of all, you're going to have the novelty. A lot of people are just going to check it out to begin with because it's a new thing. So you are going to attract a bit of an audience with that. Beyond that, though, you're going to get the types which are only, or at least primarily, concerned with doing things through legal streams, which is completely cool. I don't say that with even the slightest negative hint. That's admirable. That is what we should all aspire to do. I believe wholeheartedly in supporting the original artist, and this has a chance of doing that. I mean, granted, you could still be using the free option, but I'm sure they have some way of enticing enticing users into signing up for the premium services. So you are going to get some traffic that way, some business that way, but I do agree there needs to be a bit more. Yeah, Danny, I mean, thoughts on the same question, and also, can you see any particular thing that they should change right away that would actually help to bring in more people?
No, and actually, my feelings on this move that they've made is actually, well, I'm actually glad that they're doing this, and this is actually a good thing in a way. I mean, they're obviously never going to, or in the foreseeable future, bring everybody in. I don't think that was their their MO. But surely they, like you mentioned, there's a contingent of people who want to do things the legal way, and those are the people that they're targeting. Because the people who are going to, who are just viewing scanlation sites, probably weren't going to. Probably the same people who weren't going to buy the volumes anyway. The people who buy the volumes are also the ones who want to be caught up to the latest chapters in Japan, so they're the ones who are going to be buying the premium service. They're also the ones who are going to be using their site. So I mean, I think for what they're trying to do, this is working, and you start off small. I guess this is still a pretty big move considering that they're going all out on this one thing. Like even Viz is taking baby steps. They're having you pay for a subscription. And that's still a barrier to entry. This is straight up no barrier to entry, and I mean unless you haven't caught up to the actual manga yet. But I'm glad that the option is available.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the best available legal option. If you're comparing this to Viz, I'm not saying anything of the quality of Viz's service whatsoever, but if you're viewing this from the standpoint of, I am a user who only has viewed scanlations all this time, so I'm completely used to free, I think I would be more inclined to head towards Crunchyroll manga than I would towards Viz's immediate subscription service. I'm guessing they probably have a free trial. I would figure that that's an option, but Crunchyroll has really intensely promoted the fact that you can actually view certain chapters for free. There is some section that isn't gated off by a paywall. One scenario, Jeff, I wonder if perhaps we're heading towards it. This would be, I imagine, in the distant future, in the long run, but could you see this being one of many steps to eventually head towards these companies, Kodansha, Crunchyroll, I mean, obviously also Shueisha, Shogakukan, all those different companies eventually more intensely and aggressively targeting scanlation sites to shut them down? Do you think this could be a precursor to that?
It might be. I could definitely see stuff like that happening. I've seen it happen before in the past, but like now that like if it ever actually reaches a point where this could theoretically work, but the one single thing that's stopping them is the existence of scanlation sites, that's when I could see it happening. Otherwise, I almost wonder if scanlation sites almost help this stuff like this in a little bit, just in the instance where people wouldn't actually read the series unless they actually read them beforehand on scan sites and then went to Crunchyroll for the newest chapter. I can see that happening more right now, possibly, but like in the distant future, I could probably see them eventually targeting them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we can really underplay how much scanlation sites have helped the industry. And I'm not trying to say exclusively they are a benefit. I recognize fully that they have also detracted from the industry in other ways, that people have become too dependent on them, perhaps, and not as willing. I know for a fact that many users will look at it as, well, why should I go out and buy the physical volume? Why spend money when it's available online for free? That's a simple reality. I get that. But at the same time, like you correctly bring up, there are a lot of people that would not even know of the existence of a lot of the series that are licensed. And then it's the fact that they've been able to read these things online for free that makes them then go out and buy them at Barnes & Noble or Borders or wherever. So I mean, in that sense then, I mean, just kind of a general final thought on this. Is this good for the industry? Clint, starting with you.
I think it's a step in the right direction, if nothing else. I think they need to find a way to make it work like the scanlators do on ad revenue. I think plenty of professional endeavors are driven by ad revenue. I think we're kind of a lot of people are kind of old-fashioned that you need to monetize everything directly. There needs to be subscription fees and things like that. When plenty of places make their money through ad revenue by getting like a large majority of the people reading it, viewing it, whatever, what have you. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I like that things are being simulcast. I like that Japan is finally taking an interest in shipping their product to customers worldwide. I know for a long time they just didn't view other markets as being important or relevant. So yeah, it's a nice change, I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it overall. They definitely do have some things to address, and I think that without wishing to be too harsh, I think that there's been a lot of stubbornness involved. I think there's been a lot of traditionalism involved. It's just been that this is the way that we've always done things, and even though we recognize these avenues, I mean, surely people far smarter than me, with far more experience, hands-on with these industries, the companies, the products than me, have looked at the markets and said, well, now isn't the right time, or now isn't the right time with the people that we have and the systems that we currently have in place. But at the same time, the time is now. I think that personally, I've felt it's been long overdue, so I'm definitely happy with them doing it. But yeah, I wonder if maybe they're just altering the model a little bit. I kind of get the same sort of feeling with this, or sites like this, the same way as I do with cable packages. I'm sure that we've all felt whenever we've been shopping for cable packages, that well, I just want this channel and this channel. If you're a sports fan, I just want ESPN and Fox Sports or whatever. I only want TNT and USA for certain dramas. Why am I also having to get QVC or all these other things? And I understand why the industries do that, the companies do that. But from the consumer standpoint, that is a hindrance, because why would I want to pay? Let's say with going back to this example of Crunchyroll, why would I want to pay for Fairy Tail if I'm only interested in Yamada, for example? And it's one set fee for everything. I do understand why they do that, but maybe they have to be a little bit more adaptive or offer different options. Danny, your thoughts on kind of the general move here? Is this a good thing for the overall industry?
Yes, and honestly, I don't see how it could possibly be a bad thing. I mean, sure, there are some slight things that need to be improved, but definitely it's certainly a step in the right direction, and they certainly have the right attitude. You know, kind of breaking away from that traditionalism that you were talking about before. And you know, this is hopefully it's a slippery slope in the right direction, because then it kind of just leaves it open. If this is successful, then you know maybe then we have a case, you know, with Viz and Shueisha, where they can stand to open up a little more too with their Shonen Jump titles. So that one might be a tough nut to crack. And then maybe they'll also start much like how virtually every anime is being simulcasted every season. We can probably, I mean, it's not realistic with manga, but at the very least, we can get a much wider spread of unknown titles even, or new titles that they just need to take a chance on, which is I think the biggest issue here, because there's too much manga, and not much of it is can be proven to be popular, and as such could be a waste of resources. That's very much the reason why a lot of the new series don't get picked up by Viz either. And like we just saw a couple 4 or 5 series go by already, and none of them got simulpubbed by Viz. So they kind of have to keep it, be a little safe on that, and hopefully we get to a point where they can monetize it well enough to offset that.
Yeah, and I think this is the way to do it, really. I mean, I know that this kind of goes against what I was just saying about streamlining packages more directly, kind of picking and choosing a la carte which individual series a user would want. But at the same time, with the format that currently exists of one flat subscription fee for access to all of the series, that is how you're going to turn readers onto new series, and thereby generate additional revenue streams and create new successful series, new successful authors. I mean, it's not just a short-term investment, it's also a long-term investment. Those authors will then go on to make other series. So yeah, I would agree with you. It can only be good for the industry from that entire overall standpoint. And what about you, Jeff? Final thoughts on this, on how this affects the industry?
I think it's a good thing, but I also think it's going to be a while before we get to see the true effects of it. I'm imagining this is something like a lot of businesses where it takes months or even years for them to actually turn a profit. And so imagine that even if there's not as many people interested in this kind of service now, like eventually further down the line, it will be something much bigger, and we'll see some interesting things happening from it.
Yeah. And again, I agree with the overall sentiment that all of you have shared, that it can't really be anything but good, because honestly, I don't mean whatsoever to denigrate all the hard work that all the fine folks at these different companies have put in. I'm sure that it's been an ordeal for them. But at the same time, I would venture to guess it's not as work intensive as certain other ventures that they could have undertaken. It's unless I'm completely missing something here, which is entirely possible. The way I see it is they get the digital, they get the manga directly from the original author. They have people on site to clean out the text bubbles, replace it with the translated versions, which is the work of a few people, and they digitally ship it out, which is going to require administration, server, all that stuff. So, I mean, that's a pretty small team, frankly. The overhead costs for this shouldn't be too extravagant, which also is really nice from the standpoint that this should stick around a while. It I would imagine, has a long time, a long chance to succeed. So, yeah, I mean, I wish them the best. I'm definitely gonna be using it myself. I'm gonna try the free version because I want to see it, the way that it works, the way that they continue to update, and going from there, I hope to be enticed to pick up a premium account, because definitely, any way I can support the original artists, I'll be more than happy to do so. It's going to take me a while to get used to Simulpub, though. That's just a rubbish term.
Yeah, they're
That's
just
not a
trying
good
to
word.
rip off simulcast. It's a really bad word.
Simulpub. Yeah, you can go back to the drawing board with that one, but no, overall, definitely a thumbs up from us, I'd say. About half hour into the show, just kind of want to reset here. This is a live Friday night video stream from shonenbeam.com. Just kind of casually sitting around chatting Shonen. Please feel free to join the discussion. You can tweet at us at shonenbeam. I should probably bring up the YouTube thing to make sure. There's probably people commenting right now, and I have no idea. But definitely the easiest and most obvious way to reach us to get your questions into the show is just to at shonenbeam on Twitter. And we're going to move next now. I want to talk about what I was talking about in yesterday's episode of Beamcast, actually. I illustrated a point by comparing One Piece to Breaking Bad and Lost, which is an interesting thought, first of all. The idea, what we were talking about with One Piece, it regards the Void Century. That one of probably the biggest mystery in the world of One Piece about what happened for that period of 100 years way back, 800 to 900 years ago. And it's been talked about for so long, so many different plot threads have been deliberately intertwined with that, and Oda is constantly feeding that idea. And I was asking my guests, Danny and also John, who can't be on tonight, I was asking them if he's ever going to be able to pay that off, if Oda can ever actually properly pay off all the hype. And we had to talk about that. And the point that I brought up was I find it to be really difficult to properly pay off something like that when it's so world-focused rather than a storyline that's character-focused. And the example that I gave was to take a look at Breaking Bad versus Lost, which are two very popular shows, but they go about what they do in a very different way. First of all, you have Breaking Bad, which is recently finished, to humongous critical acclaim. It's focused around a character, Walter White, the main character. And it focused exclusively on him, and everything kind of diverged from that, branched out from him. And the creators of that show were able to take him in any direction they wanted. The oft-repeated line is Mr. Chips to Scarface. They were able to do that because there were no preconceived expectations about the way that the story was going to play out, the world, what needed to happen with that. They could just do whatever they wanted with this character because it was exclusively about that character. The other example is Lost, which, again, I want to stress, I'm not saying the characters in Lost are unimportant, but I would say, pretty categorically, the big appeal of Lost was the world. It was the mystery of what's the mystery behind the island? Why are they here? What's the meaning of here? What's this mysterious character? What's this mysterious monster? Why are all of these things happening? And it's very much about the world entirely, not exclusively focused on one character or a pair of characters. And as many of you will be aware, although that show was an unmitigated success, it was a huge, huge success, I know quite a few people personally, I'm sure you do too, that were left very disappointed with the ending, because I think it's much, much harder to get an ending right when you have cultivated those expectations around the world. People start to dream up wild scenarios, and you can't help but fail, frankly, with those kinds of expectations. I also brought up Cage of Eden, which is kind of the manga equivalent of Lost, sort of, which similarly, although there were extenuating circumstances surrounding its ending, similarly disappointed very much so at the very end. So I want to take a look at this whole idea of a character-focused series versus a world-focused series, and whether one benefits a story better than another necessarily, or if they just have different strengths. Danny, what about you first off? Do you have any particular opinion one way or the other about this entire idea?
So when we have a character-focused story, I guess the problem with that one might be that if you don't like the character, or there's slip-ups around, it's easier to screw up. I would say, like if a character takes a turn that isn't favorable, then you got to live with it, or go back on it half-assedly. And when you have a world-based series, then you have a lot more expendable pieces to it, with the characters. I guess there's a lot more flexibility with what you're doing, and in regards to how you can pull it off, versus each one, one versus the other. I've seen both work very well. I tend to see that world-based series tend to immerse you a little more, while those that surrounding a character, also get you involved, but just in a very different way. You care more about characters and stuff, which isn't to say you won't care about characters and other world building, because you can mix the two, which is what I believe One Piece does, because One Piece has a lot of great characters, in spite of its own world. It just seems to be like a whole big package. Which in regards to this whole subject of the Void Century, whether or not he actually manages to pay it off, unlike Lost, which I hear people it ruined the show for them. If Oda doesn't pull through with this Void Century, it isn't going to ruin One Piece for me, or at least sure, it could be a slip up, but I'm pretty sure it'll just recover from there. It doesn't seem like a deal breaker at all for me.
I'd find it pretty tough to say that it could be successful, honestly, because I feel that Oda has invested so much time into this. He's put so much into it now that we're kind of way past the point of no return. Robin's primary focus has become so crucial to the overall story, I think. It may not be the central plot line, because at this point you would still have to say that Luffy becoming Pirate King is. But I know for a fact that, speaking for myself, at least I would be pretty disappointed. Would it ruin One Piece? No, I wouldn't say that. But it would definitely tarnish it. There would definitely be a black mark on it in my eyes. And also, to touch on something that you said, I want to make it plainly clear. These two things are not mutually exclusive, of course. Yes, there are many series that do both characters and worlds well. I mean, pretty much all of the best series do that. I would have a difficult time picking out a series with a brilliant character that had a terrible world around him or her, and yet managed to be a good series, or vice versa. So obviously you do have to get both right. But personally, I feel that the character or characters are more important. Clint, what about you? I mean, what do you feel about this? Do you think that character-driven is maybe more successful, better, more important, or is it the world? What do you think?
I think character-driven have a unique quality to the ending of them. I think the payoff tends to be a lot better because instead of like building up this world and kind of basically giving us a bunch of exposition on how things work and kind of slowly revealing that to us, we're being taken on a journey of growth with like a specific person. And if I was going to put it in a perfect parallel for like how a character-driven story would pay off, I would say Cross Game. Cross Game's ending was excellent, and it was entirely because of the build-up of the main character and his supporting cast around him. And it led to one of the most spectacular endings I've ever read. That really pays off because you've gone through everything with the main character. Like, you've basically been there with him the entire time. And that's far from being the only character-driven story. I can think of a couple others. I mean, Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer, also known as Hoshino Samidare, was really great based on a sense of progression from the main character and his main supporting heroine, who both matured throughout the story, and it made like a visible impact on the manga. It made sense in like a really humanistic sort of way. And then I think about other series that are kind of world-driven, like Toriko, and I wonder if like the recent chapters that we've had a problem with and like the pacing issues and things like that are kind of a result of the early chapters being so driven by the world. Like, we just wanted to see more neat food places, more neat monsters, more neat locations and things like that. We were just constantly amazed with a sense of like wonder as we were being led through the Wonka factory, so to speak. It was that sort of situation. So of course, when that stops, the natural reaction is kind of going to be like, "Wow, well, now it's not as interesting as it was," and it has to stop at some point. He can't just keep rolling out these new places and things and like stuff like that. At some point, the plot has to move forward. So it's a natural weakness, I think. I don't think it can't be overcome. I don't think it has to be like a bad point to a manga. I think there are ways around it. There are ways to work it in and make a balance. Like, you don't have to have a bland, uninteresting world or a particularly character-driven story for it to be good. But I think it might be easier when it's based on characters, because we as humans just have a natural predilection towards like living experiences with other people.
Yeah, I personally find it extremely difficult to connect to a series when I don't connect with the main character. I've dropped many series very, very shortly after reading them, or beginning to read them, or beginning to watch them, in the case of anime or even television or otherwise, when I just can't connect to that main character. I mean, I've recently been talking about 12 Kingdoms with a couple different people, and that's a distinct example. Obviously not shonen, but nonetheless, that was a series that I've heard certain people go on and on about how great it is, and I totally respect that. I wish that I could see the same, but I just didn't identify. I didn't enjoy the main character, so I stopped watching, and that was an anime that I was watching. The same thing. I think your example of Toriko is perfectly spot on, because what it brings to mind is in a world-driven series, which I would agree with you that Toriko is, you do just run out of ideas at some point, and that's not to point out some failing of the author. Uh, he would have to be a complete, overwhelming genius to continuously come up with ways to surpass himself at that point, because he's already presented so much to expand our minds to this this food world of food beasts and food plants and everything. Food plants. A lot of plants already are food. Um, After a while, he is simply just going to run out of ideas, or there's going to be a short lull, or he's just going to go in a different direction. But we've cultivated certain expectations. After all the chapters that we read of Toriko, we had expectations for how the story would present ideas to us, what kind of a series it was. And all of a sudden, for the series to switch things around on us and suddenly focus mainly on the characters, I mean, I understand that it's important, but in a way, doesn't that kind of prove the argument, or at least in that particular case, that the characters are slightly more important than the world? Jeff, can you connect with a series if you're not connected with the characters?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I've seen a bunch of series where the world didn't seem too interesting, but I was able to stay incredibly invested because of the characters. Cross Game being one of the ones you mentioned that I really enjoyed, and but I couldn't think of too many series where I liked the world but not the characters and was able to stay interested in it. Like one thing, um, 'cause I was about to bring up a comparison, but I don't think it worked. I was going to compare this to like the Index series, where like once the world became more important, the world became more important than the characters at times, and that was when it started to actually fall apart. I thought
That's
that
a
seemed to be the
really
general
good example.
consensus. Hmm?
That's a great example. I would totally agree with you. And actually, that's a really interesting example because you can split it in two because of the two different series set in that universe, probably even more than two that I don't know of. But talking specifically of Index versus Railgun, I really, I wouldn't say identify with, but I really connect with and enjoy reading about Misaka. I think she's a great character. So all of the Railgun side of things is fascinating to me, and it also happens to take place in this very interesting world. I would say the world has a better chance of grabbing you from the outset, or at least it does me. Maybe that's different strokes for different folks, perhaps. But the world of Index grabbed me right away. The whole idea of science and magic kind of coexisting, but at the same time kind of clashing, and that's between both series, Index and Railgun. But I've stuck much more with Railgun. I've stayed much more interested with Railgun because of Misaka, whereas on the other side, I'm not saying that Toma is a bad character, nor Index herself is a bad character, but I don't find them nearly as interesting. So everything that they get up to, even though it's the same world, just doesn't grab me as much. I think that's a really good example. Do you have more about that?
Well, yeah, there was one other example that's similar to that. It's probably too early to say this, but the good example I could think of is Negima and UQ Holder. Compare those two, because when Negima first started out, it was like almost all about the characters. The world, the immediate world they were in looked interesting, but it never really focused on that as heavily as it could have. Like because they wanted to introduce so many characters, and it wasn't until after all of that that they introduced the world, and you were able to get into it more because of that. The UQ Holder, they do it almost in reverse. There aren't too many. There are characters, but they haven't spent too much time on them yet. You can see what the world is like, but that's just not as interesting.
And also, I would say the big selling point for UQ Holder right now is the kinds of powers on display and the kinds of, I mean, I'll cut right to it, the immortality. The fact that there are these different kinds of immortals. And while that may be associated with people, I would suggest that's more along the lines of being part of the world. Because that's not their personality traits, that's not their own characterization or their motivations or their goals or anything like that. It's simply what they are based solely on the virtue of what exists in the world. The state of what a human being can become, I would say, is a part of the world more than the part of the characters. And I would also say, I mean, UQ Holder not nearly grabbing me as much as Negima did from the outset, and that's kind of a big downfall there, because Negima, the very beginning of it, most even the most diehard fans, I assume, would say that the later portion of Negima is where it really stands out. So for the early portion, in my mind, to stand out more than the early portion of this series, which is cutting right to all the, you know, quote unquote cool stuff, all the flashy, big, gimmicky action, all that stuff, a little bit worrying there. Uh, yeah, I don't. I mean, just generally preferences, examples of either. I mean, how important is that balance? Does it lean either direction for you, Danny? Do you have particular series in mind? Because we've talked about, let's say, Cross Game, Index Railgun. For me, I can definitely say that it's all about characters first, not at the expense of the world, but I definitely need the characters to be first and foremost. Um, I'll ask you exactly the same question that I asked Jeff. Can you get into a series if you're not connected with the characters to begin with?
That's a definite no. I mean, going off of what we were just talking about, UQ Holder, I actually tried reading it. As you guys probably know, that I tried reading it. I cannot even finish the first chapter because I really could not, for the life of me, care about the characters. Like I didn't even get to any of the cool actiony stuff that you were mentioning before, and it was all like, why do I care about these people? I really don't. I mean, it was just, you know, there's going to be this disconnect when if you don't care about the characters. That's why, you know, that you have to strike a chord with both, which or at least for me, it didn't with UQ Holder. Um, as for other series where you know, you have characters, like, I think that's pretty much what you should focus on mainly is the characters. Many people do, since they're the ones that you read about, and that's the whole point you're reading it. And then you have like the world, which I believe just adds more flavor to it. I guess a situation where like the world tends to sometimes overshadow the characters. I would say Fairy Tale. Despite, you know, all the characters that it has, I'm more interested in the world of Fairy Tale than the actual characters in the series. You
Why
know,
is that? Is that because the author has he fallen short with the characters, or is that a testament to the world?
I think he has fallen short with the characters a bit, you know, but then that's probably just the shoddy writing. And like there are things in the world, you know, that I do enjoy when they are brought up, you know, such as like dragons. I really like the dragons. They're pretty good part of the lore of Fairy Tale. And you know, whenever they appear, they're always pulled off rather nicely. But like everything dealing with Natsu and Lucy and Gray and etc., it kind of just seems just regular shonen stuff in a nice backdrop. Um, as for why I kept going with the series, you know, with knowing that fact, I'm not sure, but I guess I just kept reading it, and here I am.
Well, I mean, there is an element of habit to it. I mean, why are most of us still reading Naruto or Bleach or what have you when they've each gone through bad times? It's simply because, well, I mean, I've been reading 500, 600 chapters of this series. Why stop now? The actual time investment at this point is negligible. It takes me a couple minutes to read either one. Well, it takes me 12 seconds to read Bleach, but yeah, I mean, at this point, that's just force of habit. Clint, going back to you again on the subject of this whole character versus world, you touched on Toriko. What about when a series kind of betrays you midway through? Is that something that's especially noticeable to you if a series is originally character-driven and then suddenly... well, I mean, here's an example. Let's look specifically at one. Let's talk about Naruto. in the big picture.
I was just thinking that.
You have to start with Naruto. I mean, granted, the world was cool. I'm not saying that the world of Naruto was nothing to begin with, but the world of Naruto to begin with was not as important as that central character, Naruto, who we saw his tragic upbringing and we saw him having to overcome his social stigma and all these different things, and we followed him for a long time, and then he was supported, he was supplemented by the big standout arc in everyone's mind, the Chunin exam, and all of a sudden, oh wow, all these things are possible in this world? So, Kishimoto definitely nailed aspects of both right there. But as time went on, it started to be more and more about powers in the universe and what can be done and the politics of really, really big picture states, not so much the individual relationship between characters. So that one's kind of fluctuated back and forth. What does that do to you as a reader when the series kind of betrays its own understanding of where its strengths lie?
Well, as we've been talking about this, I've kind of been doing analysis in my mind and kind of thinking through this, and like I started realizing like all these moments in manga that we remember as being good were these parts where it had a bunch of character-driven stories going on, and then for every series that we feel started to fall flat at some point, it was because there was exclusive focus put on the world and a bunch of pure exposition with very little character interaction, very little character-based stories. It was all just plot being driven by world development. And I'll start with Naruto because that's what I was originally thinking of, and that's what we've just mentioned, where the high point of Naruto in almost everyone's mind, almost everyone who's ever read the series, is the Chunin exams. Everyone goes back to the Chunin exams as being the glowing point of Naruto. It was the golden ages. It was the thing that got you into the manga and kept you reading it for the next 400 chapters. And that was because there were all these little interesting stories and interactions between all the characters. You got to find a character that you liked. Everyone has a different favorite from the Chunin exams. Everyone identifies with someone. They all have really unique character traits. There's a bunch of intertwining, overlapping stories between them. Like, it could be an important story, like with Neji and Hinata, that we had quite a bit of development on in that period, or it could be like a really inconsequential story, like the Shino Ikucho combo, where like their dads have this thing going on and they wind up having the thing going on to the next generation, like a kind of team bond between them. And that's what kept people in that. And when we moved past it and started going into like the tailed beasts and Akatsuki and there being like this evil plan for the world, and it became sort of about like learning to control all of these new forms of power that exist in the world. It was all this world focus that moved away from the characters, and that may be a big reason why everyone's like, the Chunin exams was so good, because once we moved past that, we didn't have characters anymore. And like while I was thinking about this, I kind of started imagining like, okay, so what are other plots that people didn't really care for? Well, Bleach, Hueco Mundo was massively unpopular, at least here, if not everywhere else. And Hueco Mundo was kind of this non-character driven, world driven, they go to this weird place and we have to find out how everything works there and find out all about the society of the Hollow and things like that. And we kind of fell out of touch with Bleach right there when it ceased being about Ichigo, the main character, who I know both me and you have always found interesting. And then I think of Negima, which we kind of fell out of touch with for a little while in the Magic World arc when it started like going through all these things that exist in the Magic World and like all the ways that things work there. And we kind of didn't have the focus on the characters anymore, and it's just more and more I'm coming into focus with these like arcs or periods of time where a manga has ceased being driven by the characters and started being focused on the world, and people kind of lose interest through that arc.
Yeah, Jeff, I wonder actually if the impression that I'm getting, because Clint is listing some very, very good examples here, and there is, I don't know if it's an axiom necessarily, but this is something that at least I believe, that everything has been done. Original thought is dead is kind of the catchy way, the really pessimistic way of saying that. It's so unbelievably, it's probably impossible to come up with something completely, truly original at this point in time, when you have thousands of years, maybe not quite, but no, actually, yeah, literally thousands of years of fiction and drama and whatnot, everything has been done. It's the way that we arrange them. It's the way that we dress them up with a new shine to kind of refresh them. I don't mean the endless string of Hollywood reboots. I mean arranging certain different characters in different situations in a way that we haven't seen for a long time. That will kind of revitalize interest in that particular trope or stereotype or whatever it is. Um, I feel that perhaps, given this idea, if in fact you believe that you cannot be completely original, I find it easier to forgive lack of originality relative to characters because at least I can relate to the characters in some certain aspect. If a character is going through a tough time that perhaps I've had in my life, I can identify, even if that might be stereotypical, because that's just a natural part of human existence. Whereas the world being so detached from emotion, the world just being setting, place, event, those kinds of things, if some aspect of that is unoriginal, is borrowed from something else, is repetitive or stereotypical or whatever, that I don't forgive quite as easily. Is that something that you would say as well, that perhaps that's another failing of being focused on the world, that it's easier to, I'm not saying copy or plagiarize necessarily, but it's easier to fall into the trap of stereotyping?
Yeah, I think that like if a world it does fall into the stereotypes and it is much more noticeable. I thought of a few reasons why that might be. I'm not sure if any of them are true. One thing I thought is like we can sort of accept characters being stereotypical because a series will almost never like a series will most series don't have one or two characters. They have large amounts of them, and it's almost impossible to write every single one of them originally. But if the world looks and resembles something another world of a series far too much, that's something that's harder to look past because like it's the only chance you actually it's the only one there's only one world for any series obviously. So if it resembles another series too much, then it makes the series look it affects the series far more than just one single character out of place would.
Yeah.
Like it would be the same thing if almost all of your characters were felt like they were copied from something else. Like that's almost what it feels like when the world feels like it's copied.
Well, let's take an example from this very week, actually. In Bleach chapter 555, which we all of us just said, oh, that's just Snake Way. Clint came to me in chat, Steam chat, just immediately, have you read Bleach yet? Look, it's just Snake Way. And everyone's making jokes about that. We weren't making jokes about the fact that all these characters were using humongous beam attacks and saying, oh, look, that's a Kamehameha, necessarily. I mean, okay, some of us, I'm sure, have pointed out certain similarities. We haven't looked at the fact that, oh, look, Ichigo is helping people. Goku helped people. He's just Goku. But when you lift an element of the world, I find it to be more identifiable. I think it is more noticeable. And then because you've done that, then you start relating everything else. And I think, Jeff, the point that you're making is a really strong one. Because if you have characters that are in certain ways stereotypical, and let's face it, you have to. It's impossible to avoid that. No matter how you dress it up, there's going to be some element that you will somehow be able to relate to another character. But if you have a whole bunch of characters that are in a vibrant, interesting, creative, moderately original world, at least one that feels new, even if it isn't literally new, then you're still just going to be able to focus on the character's own status, own traits, own benefits, own pros, own cons. If those same exact characters are transplanted from that beautiful, original, vibrant world and put into a world that really closely resembles something else, all of a sudden you're not looking at, oh, well, this character can cast magic spells. You're looking at, oh, that character is just a mage from this other series. You're actually going to be able to pinpoint specific examples and lift them and go back and forth between series. So overall, I mean, I think we're just about at a point where we should probably stop conversation, but I want to get closing thought from each of you. Just where you come down on this character versus world, more important, and just some kind of a closing thought. And let's start with you, Danny. World, character, your thoughts?
So to add on to what was being talked about earlier, that this whole characters being cliched, reusing every trope, and that's unavoidable. It's pretty much every. Well, I mean, shonen's not a genre, but let's just say, for the sake of this argument, that there are many tropes that occur in shonen manga,
Right.
and they get run through their paces very frequently. The only reason that it becomes too apparent in some and not apparent in others, or at least they don't get called out for it, is because those series are much more engaging. Kind of like how general criticism of video games tends to be that, you know, so and so video game is too repetitive. Well, every video game is pretty much reusing things from other video games. The only reason is that they're good enough to not make it feel like it's being repetitive, which is what I see the problem is with a lot of, you know, shonen manga that tend to fail. You know, they're labeled generic because you can clearly see it happening right in front of you, and it kind of takes you out of the experience. Whereas, you know, where this falls in the whole world debate is because I feel that the world adds a flavor to it. It allows for your characters to do the, you know, reuse the same tropes, but make it feel fresh. Despite, you know, redoing the same thing over and over again. You know, the hero's going to win, certain actions are going to happen, and we're going to see it happen, but at the very least, it's going to feel interesting.
Yeah, and let's not underplay the benefits of familiarity. There is something to be said. I mean, when you go to a movie and it's good guy versus bad guy, there is that part inside of you that's waiting for the good guy to win. And you may, at the end of the movie, come off all cocky and talk to your friends, oh, come on, that's so unoriginal. But come on, deep down inside, there is an uplifting feeling when something plays out the way you want. That may also be a little bit egotistical, that something is playing out to your own prediction because you see something coming, and then it does happen. There is a satisfying feeling. Loads and loads of fiction is built entirely upon paying off those expectations. So that's not to say stereotypes are bad. I just think that the stereotypes and the criticism focused around stereotypes and repetition are more noticeable, like you say, Danny, when they are on a world stage. It's just to me at least, it's much more apparent that way. Final thoughts on this subject, Jeff? Where do you fall to close world versus character?
Yeah, I definitely think that character should come first and world should come second. Like, of course, I always prefer it when a series does both, but it's like I said before, I don't think apart from possibly Magi in places, I don't think I've actually seen too many series in which I enjoyed the world but not the characters.
Okay, and Clint, last word on this subject?
I think characters have to come first. I think the characters are what makes your world interesting. At the end of the day, you can put as many cool things, places, powers, animals, beasts, whatever in it. The characters are what hold people in the world. They're what submerge you in it. So if you don't have that, you don't have a reader.
Yep, I would totally agree. All right, well, it's been just a little bit over an hour, especially with our late start, probably right bang on an hour. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Yeah, if you watched this live, if you tuned in after the fact, check this out on YouTube. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the direction we're going with these live video streams. Please continue to check in. The current plan for our sort of weekly calendar is Monday and Thursday still Beamcast as usual. Monday is the catch-all show. Thursday is the Big Three show. And then the new features that we're doing Tuesday is the new Tier List Tuesday live video streaming. Get involved with that. Come debate with us, discuss with us, suggest new characters, suggest that we move certain characters around, get interactive with that. And then this Friday night's just going to be kind of a laid-back, casual chat. Turn this on, listen while you're doing other stuff, maybe pop in a couple questions here and there, a couple comments, and talk World of Shonen. So I'd like to thank my guests very much, Clint, Danny, Jeff. Thank you very much for being here. Listeners, viewers, thank you all so much for being here as well. Please continue to check out shonenbeam.com and all our video streams, podcasts, social media, all that nonsense. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye.